So it's Prime Minister's questions today, but without Boris Johnson. And that's because he's been busy, as you can see here, striding the world stage. First of all at the G7 in southern Germany, today in Madrid at the NATO summit. By the end of last week, you might have been forgiven for thinking his time as Prime Minister was coming close to being over and he couldn't risk being abroad for so long. But, as you can see, he's still very much Prime Minister, even though both of you two wanted him gone. So, Andrea, what's happened?
Well, I think that's a bit stretching it a bit. I said to my constituents in a reply to them that I agreed with Sue Gray's analysis and that the Prime Minister needs to take responsibility, which is my absolutely clear view. However, the party has had a confidence vote and it was clearly won by the Prime Minister, and therefore, as with every democratic vote, we then get up the next day and we move on, and what the Prime Minister is doing is seeking to lead the country as he should and make a good fist of it both at NATO and in supporting Ukraine against Russia's aggression.
Right, unacceptable failings of leadership. How can you have changed your mind on that big fundamental?
I haven't changed my mind. What I'm saying is that the Prime Minister needs to take responsibility for it. He has profusely apologised. He said that lessons have been learned, and he's determined to improve things and to make government better, to learn those lessons and to move on.
Are you comfortable, though, Andrea Leadsom, continuing to serve a Prime Minister you clearly have no faith in?
I am very happy with the Conservatives' agenda, with our government's agenda. I think it is absolutely vital that we focus on the things that really matter to people, like the cost of living, like the economy, like getting ourselves back into a good place after the COVID lockdowns and so on. And that is absolutely vital. So yes, I'm backing the government, I'm backing the Prime Minister.
So you're tolerating Boris Johnson, even though you said those unacceptable failures of leadership couldn't be tolerated?
No, I didn't say that. I said there were unacceptable failings of leadership, and I agree with the Sue Gray report. And please don't put words in my mouth. I have been completely clear all the way through. There have been unacceptable failings of leadership. They are the responsibility of the Prime Minister. There was a confidence vote. He won it, and therefore, in line with every democratic vote in this country, whether the media like it or not, we then move on the next day. The next day is a different day, and what the Prime Minister is focusing on is learning those lessons and actually seeking to lead the country in very important issues.
Yes, OK,
like
but it is quite hard to keep up.
It is quite hard to
keep up with the views and opinions of Conservative MPs.
Not the case at all.
And now with Boris Johnson.
I am entirely consistent on this point.
OK.
I've now said twice exactly my opinion and my view. I could not be clearer. I mean, I can say it a third time if that would help, but I do think
you've just given up, basically,
No, I haven't given up at all. That's to put words in my mouth. I think
not putting words in your mouth, it's asking the questions, because the last time people heard you speak, Andrea Leadsom, those were the words you uttered.
That's not the case
You
at all.
uttered the unacceptable failures of leadership as underlined by the Sue Gray report.
No, that is not true. I wrote to my constituents saying there have been unacceptable failings of leadership and those are the responsibility of the Prime Minister. One of my constituents put that to the press. I made no comment to the press. The day after the vote, I had cameras waiting outside my flat and I was very clear. The only thing I've said on the record at any point is that a vote was held. The vote was won by the Prime Minister. Now we need to move on and focus on the priorities of the people of this country.
Which you said.
Which are
all right, you've made it absolutely clear. We need to move on to what's happened in terms of your strategy for seeing the Prime Minister gone.
Me? Well, I'm completely consistent. I think he should be gone because he is not psychologically
Yes, but what's happened?
competent.
He's still there. He's very much there.
Well, he's not here, and I think that they're using some of this foreign travel as a means of a kind of shield to protect him from what's going on in the tea room and in the House of Commons, which is a lot of Conservative MPs, I'm not saying this about you, Andrea, but a lot of Conservative MPs are saying one thing in private and a completely different thing in public, and they're all plotting. And whereas last time, I think, for the vote of confidence, the first vote of confidence, it was all rather organic, and I suspect, indeed, that Downing Street put some of the names in to have the vote a little bit before the by-elections. Now they are organised, and I think there will be another vote of no confidence. But the only thing I'd say to Andrea is the idea that Boris is learning a lesson, that Boris Johnson, is learning a lesson, I think is mistaken. He's categorically himself said, if you think that there's going to be some big psychological change in me, you've got another thing coming.
Yeah.
He will not change.
Yeah.
There will be more scandals every single week. We've now got the £150,000 tree house, which is more than the cost of a house in my constituency in the Rhondda, nearly double the cost of some houses.
All right, I'm going to come back to Andrea in just a moment, but let's just get the opening thoughts in terms of what has happened. Boris Johnson is still very much there striding the world stage, despite all the things that have happened. The Sue Gray report, the vote of no confidence, the loss of the by-elections, a fixed penalty notice.
Well, I think what Andrea just said actually illustrates the dilemma that many Conservative MPs are in, which is that the vote of confidence, the timing of that, it was not a sort of coordinated effort by backbench MPs. It just happened to be when a certain number of letters went in. And I think, quite frankly, if the confidence vote had happened after these by-election results that we've seen, that Boris Johnson might not still be Prime Minister. I think it is now going to take some time for him to go as a result. I think there's no question that Boris Johnson is the kind of man who would resign honourably because he's been found to have broken, it's just not going to happen. So he will need to be forced out. And I think the fact that the confidence vote happened a little bit too early for that means it is now going to take some months. We've got another big moment coming up in the autumn when the Privileges Committee produces its report on whether Boris Johnson misled Parliament. And I think that will be another moment of danger, actually, for Johnson.
Olivia?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it is going to take a little while now. That no confidence vote did happen too early, really, and I think it is quite possible that there were some people in Downing Street who were putting names in so that it could happen before the by-elections. I think there are plenty of Conservative MPs who are completely fed up with him, and it is true that it doesn't look like he's going to really change. So I think the most likely thing that happens is there is some way of rejigging the policy so that there will be another vote of no confidence within the next 6 months or so, and or else the Privileges Committee brings him down. That said, I mean, I do feel a little bit sorry for the Prime Minister because, we say that he's strutting along on the world stage to distract from what's going on at home. It was quite important that he was at the G7 and quite important that he's at the NATO summit as well. And actually, I'm not usually a huge fan of G7 summits. Sometimes it feels a bit like they're just kind of jamborees. But this one, there did seem to be some agreement. So, it is important that he is there and he is doing his job.
Well, as Sonia said, the Privileges Committee, I will come to you in just a second, the Privileges Committee is choosing a chairman. That's the committee that's being tasked with an inquiry into whether Boris Johnson misled Parliament and MPs over Partygate. Andrea, do you think if he has and is found to have misled Parliament, he will resign then?
I mean, actually, the process of the Privileges Committee, and by the way, I'm delighted that it is being established, and the government very clearly allowed, if you like, didn't whip MPs on our side to vote against that, allowed that to go through, which was really important. So it is a good opportunity to clarify what's gone on. It's cross-party. Yep. Those select committees tend to work very collegiately together. We very rarely have a split report.
So if he's found to have misled Parliament, will he resign?
Well, that is got to wait until its findings come out. What's important right now is that every MP has confidence in the establishment of that Privileges Committee and in the process that's about to take place.
Right.
But as to what happens at the end of it, you've got to wait until the outcome.
Well, what I'm sort of asking is, do you think he will go then? I mean, it's a pretty egregious breach to have misled Parliament. Does it mean that he'll resign?
It depends what the Privileges Committee says. I mean, if it's a completely... he's deliberately misled Parliament, there would be consequences of that because, no, exactly.
Well, I know, or unknown, but if he deliberately misled Parliament...
If he's deliberately misled Parliament and the Privileges Committee were to say, therefore, there will be consequences, and it were to go, for example, back to the Standards Committee, then it could...
Chris, what would the sanction be other than him having to resign?
So the House can't make the Prime Minister resign unless there's a vote of confidence of the whole House. The committee could recommend that he just apologise to the House. The committee might say, oh, well, hang on, you've sort of apologised already, and this is so egregious and so many instances when you have misled Parliament. And the issue isn't deliberately misled, by the way, it's knowingly misled. It's a subtle difference, but I think it's an important one which the committee will have to consider. So, for instance, Admiral Lord Nelson, was he lying when he put his spyglass to his blind eye and said, what ships? I see no ships. Did the Prime Minister get real assurances or didn't he? He said that he did. Anyway, you asked me the specific question, and I know you're looking grumpy with me.
No.
What the sanction might be. The House could decide, either because of the committee recommends it or because the House decides, to suspend him from the House. I think if any Prime Minister was suspended even for a single day from the House of Commons, he would have to go.
Right, OK, well, that's what I'm getting to. And I tell you the reason why, because your colleague, Steve Baker, Conservative MP, who is fed up with the Prime Minister, is worried that he might not resign, even if he is found to have knowingly misled Parliament.
You see, then...
Hang on, my question then only to you is, would you support the rules being changed, the rules in the Conservative Party that would allow you to have another confidence vote in the Prime Minister in 6 months?
I wouldn't, and the reason for that is because I don't believe in, if you don't like the answer, asking the same question again and changing the rules to enable yourself to. However, in answer to your question of what happens then, if, as Chris says, if there were a suspension and if the individual suspended would not resign, that could then go to a matter of bringing the House into disrepute, and then that has a whole new avenue which goes to the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards, which could come back to the Standards Committee through the Independent Expert Panel. I mean, Chris and I have lived through this for many years. There are routes.
You can tell.
It's not the end of the story, but I won't bore you with
the point is he's never going to
geek.
change. This is him. This is how he behaves. And the very fact that we're thinking that the House could suspend him and he wouldn't then, in honour, resign is the problem that
we're
we've
not
got.
All right, I'm going to...
that. Joe is postulating.
No, that's all I'm asking the question. Thank you for
I
that,
actually agree
Andrea.
with Steve Baker, to be honest. I think there is a chance with this Prime Minister that he gets suspended from the House for a day or two and thinks, well, I'm just going to try and brazen it through.
What do you think, Olivia?
I think that's quite likely. He's brazened everything else out.
Well, on that note of agreement,
then the House could decide to go for 10 days, suspended for 10 days, and then it's up to the voters in his constituency that would decide whether he remains. I think they'd turf him out.
Let's talk about something completely different.